All right, well, it's just gone 10 in my central time zone in the US. So I'll get started kind of with the idea that people might dribble in. Welcome to the workshop. My name is Corey Brady. I'm an assistant professor at Vanderbilt, where a group of us are working on an initiative that we call the Computational Thinking and Learning Initiative, where we have brought together people from across Vanderbilt's faculty, from the education school, the computer science school, arts and sciences, and the libraries. And you may have seen some of us around this conference. For me, this is the first SnapCon. I've used Snap in my own teaching, but I haven't ever made it to the conference. So it's a bittersweet thing for it to be remote, but it's gotten me in, and I'm very impressed and excited to be a part of it. I don't know for how many people it's their first like me, but I thought while people are coming in, it might be interesting, since there are parallel sessions and you have to make these difficult choices, if people could put into the chat one thing that you've learned from SnapCon. I think that would be great. We're all going to have the opportunity to be looking at the recorded session. So if you just put one thing that you would recommend somebody take a look at from the conference so far. Akash, my colleague at Vanderbilt, says NetsBlox. We always have our own interests in mind. DB Snap, so we've got some database work. What is MQTT? The scraping tool from the keynote yesterday. Data processing. So Arthur, can you tell us what MQTT is, either in text or voice? Oh, cool. Well, excellent. Let's, I don't want to pinch time. I've purposely set this workshop up so that in the hope that we would have a leisurely opportunity to converse. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't get started. So let me start sharing. And I'll do my usual thing. So like I said, my name is Corey Brady. I'm at Vanderbilt as an assistant professor in the education school. And I wanted to talk to you about a tool that goes along with the Snap extension NetsBlox, but that we're looking at for Snap as a whole, called activity galleries. The idea being for classroom groups to share things, work in progress or final products, in a way that they can view, remix, and run each other's work. So partly, I think it's, if you think about what the experience of a good conference like SnapCon is, it's this idea that you get a diversity of ideas, of concepts, of ways of thinking about the question of educational computing, from unexpected directions, and that integrating and making sense of that diversity of voices is one of the challenges and one of the joys of working with a group of people. So thinking about how a classroom might be such a place. Since I'm in presenter mode, I can't see the chat. So if anybody has a question, please stop me. And in fact, my colleagues at Vanderbilt, if you could just yell out if you see something that needs attention, please. So the overview of the session today, again, we have an hour. The technology is fairly simple, but its use in the classroom is something that I've found teachers really enjoy talking about prospectively as well as retrospectively. So hopefully we'll have some time to think about how you might use a tool like this in your classroom. So this is the overview, beginning with why I do this kind of technology work. And what the purpose of this tool is for classroom collaboration. Then talking about some other instructional designs that use similar tools, so you have a sense of what it might look like. Then jump in as a student to see what it actually feels like to use a gallery. And then see how to build, to set one up on your own. The spoiler is that it's very easy, and hopefully everyone will leave the session having a gallery set up for themselves. And then we'll finally talk a little bit about how one might use such a thing. So starting out for what kind of thing this is and why I think it's important. So I started working in education technology in the late 90s when there was a really popular line of advertisement talking about anytime, anywhere learning. One of the hardware companies that was big at the time was Gateway. They used to have big boxes with cows on them as their brand. And this was, it was a heady time when everyone was saying the internet is going to change everything, and personal computing finally was going to make a big difference in education. And Gateway came out with this ad whose caption was "the classroom of the future." And this kind of hit me. I ran into this ad like it was a brick wall. And ever since, whenever I've shown this picture to teachers, I'm getting again the sort of horrible chill of this as a vision for the future of classroom learning. And I think that feeling is shared by a lot of people. Let me actually pause and see what people's reactions are, and please speak out because I can't see the chat, or what you notice. Whoops. I didn't mean to do that. I don't know how to get back to it. That's how. So what do people notice? No communication between the kids. That's definitely one thing that strikes me. Anything else? Yeah, I can't even see their faces. So I think the between the kids' communication, there's actually no physical reason they can't, except that the screens are so compelling that they don't even think to look to the right or left. But what a lot of the teachers were surprised that Gateway thought this was a good idea in depicting was that the teacher can't see anything about what's going on. We can tell maybe that they're, in quotes, on task, but we really can't tell what the task is, what they're getting out of it. And it's not the case that nothing is going on. There could be really rich learning there, but they're really not making use of the fact that they're in a classroom. So they might as well be anywhere, anytime. And that was the kind of chilling thing, when it sounded like anywhere, anytime learning was a step towards freedom and kind of bathing our culture in a culture of learning. What I and a lot of people who had bought into the idea of personal computing got terrified about here was that it might be solipsistic. It might look like losing the social side of learning experiences. And so this image was a negative motivator for a lot of the change that happened in my life at the turn of the millennium, in turning towards thinking about technology as connecting people rather than only as providing rich learning experiences that would tend to create tunnel vision. So enough about me. I at the time was working for a company who is sort of the king of solipsism, Texas Instruments, whose technology was really, I think if you think about it, how it looks in the market, was oriented towards beating out your peers. So you get the best graphing calculator, so you do best on the exam and beat your classmates. I joined TI with the mission to create a classroom learning system. So I went around to a lot of teachers who were fantastic educators using TI and asked them what they saw a classroom as being for, which is a really kind of aggressive question. But I felt the danger that this move towards anywhere, anytime learning was eroding our shared sense of why we learn in classrooms. Is it really just a kind of production industrial solution to the problem that we have more students than we have teachers? Or is there something we actually get out of being together in a social setting? So I went from the kind of what is a classroom for, talk to me about that, to what is classroom learning particularly good at? And then this question that started to be a design tool. What can a classroom group of students do, or when can a classroom group do things together that they can't do on their own? So thinking about how we might use the classroom space and classroom time together to do things that build on the diversity of our group and that we can't really do if we're all alone. So in terms of computer science education, I started thinking about how students and their work might be resources for their classmates, how we might think about each other's work as cases of solutions, how we might support activities that foreground multiple ways of approaching problems, and then how that we might build a classroom culture of remixing in a thoughtful way. So you can see how these might build on a notion of the classroom as a learning group, as a learning entity that can do things together that the individual component people can't do it by themselves. So I wasn't the first person to be terrified about solipsism in education, and so I had the fortune of connecting up with other education researchers. I actually made the switch after producing a product at TI called TI Navigator that did bring the calculators together as a collaborative network. After producing several versions of that, I left industry and went to academic life, and joined a group of education researchers who have been thinking about this for a long time. I'll mention one, Walter Stroop, who's now at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, who has pushed this idea of generative activities. His thesis advisor, Judah Schwartz, I want to remember because Judah died this year. He was famous for asking for a number of really provocative comments. One being the maxim never to ask a question in a classroom with one right answer. And that's an idea. You could see how if you follow that maxim, you never are in the situation of what we call the initiation response evaluation pattern, or of asking for volunteers, seeing the same 5 hands that always are raised, choosing one of them, getting the right answer, and then moving on, or getting the wrong answer and moving to volunteer number 2 until you get the right answer, and then moving on. Basically, you learn very little about what the class thinks with that kind of pattern. And so the question is, how do you get started with asking a question that doesn't have just one right answer? One of the really simple thumbnail techniques, and I only mention this because it shows the simplicity of switching your pedagogical approach. It doesn't mean that the task after envisioning it is easy, but you could see the difference between 2 categories of question. One is a one right answer question, something like what is 3 times 40 if I was in a middle elementary school classroom. But if I turn that question on its head and I say to the class, give me several ways to make 120. Let's just, for a second, if people could give me a way or two in the chat to make 120. We'll get a feel for how this feels in a classroom. So 119 plus 1, so switching the operation from multiplication to addition. How about another one? How about if everybody takes 40 times 3 is nice. So that's a manipulation of the initial prompt. That's interesting. 240 divided by 2, that's cool. So in an elementary school classroom, that might not come up very soon, especially in the form of multiplying by a fraction. If you see it as a division, it might come up earlier. That's nice. So now we've got more than one operation. So 100 times 2 minus 80. The square root of whatever 100 times 12 squared is, or 10 times 12 squared. Excellent. So that'll come up in some classrooms. Somebody's using bitwise. Excellent. Fantastic. There's Albert. That's a great example. Sometimes things like this do come up in elementary school. This is a famously difficult to memorize property of our number system called the distributive property, where you involve multiplication and addition, and kids get it wrong a lot. But now in our classroom, it could be the Albert property. So one of the things that happens when you solicit comments or ideas like this from the class is that you get key things, key principles in the world named after the students, which is good for mnemonics, but it's also, if you're thoughtful as a facilitator, really an interesting way to build mathematics identity, in our case, computer science identity, by associating with individual people. So here is Akash has given a great example of something that might appear to be wrong. So we might have a debate about whether this actually is 120. When I put it into the calculator, it doesn't, and subtract 120, I don't get 0. So what is going on there? And I think what's happened is that Akash has used base 2. So this gives you a little sense of, number one, what happens when you lob a question like, give me several ways to make 120 into the classroom. You can imagine that pretty much any closed form, even standardized test item, could be turned from a single right answer to a generative activity where students generate possible ways of performing a given operation or achieving a given goal. So so based on that idea, the question is, can't spell computer science. The question is, how does this play into computer science? And it's one observation is that engineering tasks in general are really good places for students to create a product that meets a specification. So fulfilling an API or completing a task is a really great place to see different ways of going about the problem, and a really dangerous way to show a single right answer as the only approach. So there might really be a good use of generative activities in computer science. And in such situations, it's really great right away to see a diversity of answers reflecting different ways of thinking, and that those different ways of thinking are coming from your students. So instead of remembering that the distributive property is on page 75, we have a named theorem. And similarly, we could have algorithms that show up for the first time in our group space as associated with particular people in the class who are the experts at the moment of at doing this, and people you might consult if you're trying to implement and run into a barrier. So so let's see how it plays out as a student. I've taken a fairly simple turtle geometry prompt. And I didn't mean to go there yet. I'm going to copy this to the chat. And if you follow that link, you'll come to a page that I've prepared as an activity space using the gallery. So what I've done is I've set this out as kind of imagining. In fact, this is the first activity that I do with students in Snap or NetsBlox, which is it's in the context of a computational tools in geometry class. So not surprising that I would do turtle geometry. But if your challenge is not to make well, if your challenge is relatively open, make me make me code that creates a polygon. So that's your challenge for the next 5 to 10 minutes. When you have a solution and your stage shows the solution, so make sure that you're showing something you want to be your thumbnail of your work. As soon as you do that, as soon as you have that, see if you can figure out how to publish to the gallery. I'm curious whether people can do that without guidance. And if you're having any trouble getting in, please let me know. Notice you didn't need to have a, was I not sharing screen for a long time?
You haven't been sharing screen since like the second slide. I didn't know if you noticed, so I don't want to do anything. But...
Yeah, please shout at me if I do something totally idiotic like that ever again, which is almost certain that I will. So now if you were not able to follow the link to get to this place, please let me know. And if you, I think my instructions still make sense even if you didn't have something you were looking at. So your goal is to make a program that draws a polygon. As soon as you have that solution in whole or in part as something you're ready to share, then figure out how to share to the gallery. Aha, so we have our first share. And our second one. So a little bit like the answers to the different ways to make 120, what we often see is complexity building. So this is not an unusual move that we start to see, that we start seeing a kind of low threshold answer. That's the great thing, is that the person that once you've submitted, you can submit again. But what we see is the group building on itself, adding more sides. Then we have fourth one down, we have somebody who's introduced, it looks like, an argument to their approach, which might be a thing that you'd be curious about. We have different sides with different radii, different circumferences. Cool. So one thing about activities like this is that you can observe patterns and nudge in one direction or another. So with the 120 example, if I was interested in, if today's lesson was going to be about prime factorization or something that about the multiplicative relations, I might ask people to only use multiplication. Or in fact, I might even ask people to only use one multiplication. And then we could fill out a space such as all of the divisors of 120. Here we might say, we might do similar kinds of things. or we might observe when an innovation comes up for the first time. If we were in a classroom where we did not have accounts yet, this would be entirely anonymous. At this point, though, I can see by the username who is who. And that's a question that you'd want to choose, or that's an important matter for the culture of the classroom. Early on in the year, you might ask people to be not logged in so that they see, so that we don't see identities. So let me pull up one and show you how that works. So if I click on one of these tiles, I see information about the project, and notice that there's a comment line. So different activities, depending on the kind of how much work has gone into the production of the object, we might use or not use a comment thread. But regardless, I have this option to load. So as soon as I load, I pull in the project of the student whose work I've seen, and this is a fully editable project. So now I could say, well, let me see if I can make a slight modification, a little bit along the lines of the keynote yesterday, in which we saw that editing code is easier than starting from scratch. So our goal is to not leave any students behind. So one of the approaches in a generative activity is to make it low threshold. So in saying make me a polygon, you could do that. You could achieve that with a relatively simple set of code. But we also have a high ceiling and where we could go to more complexity. So, but if I was interested in seeing if I could make this my own, looks like that's 6 and that's 7, or that 7 could be just repeated twice. Let's see if that works. So yeah, but now, oh, I didn't clear the screen, so that's kind of cool. So maybe what happens if I follow this pattern out? That's kind of cool. I like that enough that I'm going to share. So if you had trouble sharing, I'm now going to show you how to do it. This little camera at the bottom, if I press it, it asks me for my username, and I have not logged in, so I'm going to just show up as Corey. And this is, I worked heptagon. So if I publish now, I get notice that it worked, and then mine shows up as the last in the list. In activities where you want students to not be distracted by the, think of it as like the chat window here, you can always close off the gallery from view, and you can even then still publish there. So as I promised, I think very simple. You could load in any activity or just the blank untitled document into the main workspace. And students can create from scratch or open from their project set.
I think we have a couple questions.
Excellent, excellent.
So one of the questions is, how does the teacher create the gallery, and are the projects saved permanently there?
Awesome question. So that's the next step. I'm going to show you how you create a gallery, and then how you create a room within the. So the components to the gallery are the main activity that's going on in the main pane, and the set of responses that have come in. So if I was in my first period class and I ran this gallery, what we'll see is that this little hash at the end of the URL is the room. So if I change that room, I get a new fresh gallery with the same base activity.
Another question was, as a student, how do you remove, like if you want to remove something you've published, how would you be able to do that?
Yeah, that's actually so at the end of the session, I'm going to ask for feedback and future requests. One of the things we've done that we have not supported that functionality to date, partly because the danger for doing it accidentally is so high, but also partly for simplicity. So right now you can't unpublish. Are there other questions?
Just like one more, I think. Is the comment history saved? Oh, is this
The comment history in both Zoom and the gallery it's saved, yes. So Brian tells me I did nice work, that will show up 3 weeks from now when I come back to this activity in this space. So
okay.
the entire state is state of the classroom work is saved, so you can continue an activity over multiple days, for example.
Can the teacher unpublish if a student requests it? I think that's another question.
So that sounds like a request, right? Like I think one other thing that's notable here is actually there isn't an obvious teacher. So this is a very flat collaboration space. You could do this you could use the gallery as it stands in a small group work, as well for a multi-person project, for example, over multiple days. Right now, there's no notion of teacher that is an administrator.
Perfect. I think that's all of them.
Cool. So remind me I'm not going to jump ahead to type these great suggestions in the last slide here, but actually, since you all have access to the slides, you could add that if you wanted, or just remind me when we get to it. Okay. So the kinds of activity space that I've explored so far, this is I'd love to get inspired with other ways to use it. One is there are kind of two categories. One is short construction activities like the one we just did that build on this idea of generative activities, where you set up a problem and expect a diversity of responses, and you want students to build on each other to become more sophisticated or more elaborated around that particular problem. And then there's a second category without a starter project, where you might, for example, at the end of a short course, you might share projects out, or at the end of a unit, where people are bringing to the stage things that they have been working on for quite a long time. In those two extremes on a continuum, there's a lot in between where you might use an activity space as a thing you came back to multiple sessions. So let's see how it works and make sure that we can all do it ourselves. We're at about the halfway point, so I think that's pretty nice. So we'll have plenty of time. So the first thing is if you took a look at the URL bar just the URL that I sent you to this year, it's kind of crazy complicated. The spoiler is you don't actually have to do any manipulation of it by hand, but it's good to know what the pieces are. So the first piece is letting my server know that that a gallery request is coming. Then we have the starter project, which is really the rest of this, that is going to stand up in the main stage. This could be if you were using the non-released version of NetsBlox, you could replace this with dev. This is basically just pulling up what you would see. In fact, if you select this part, you would see just the naked main starter project. And then the last bit after the hash code is a classroom name or an activity name. So as an example, here, if I just changed the SnapCon to, I think I called it testing, yeah. Then I would see the same base activity with a different classroom. Basically, this is my test work to make sure that everything was working a couple months ago. But all that has changed is the hash code. So if you were thinking about going from period 1 to period 2, all that might need to change would be, like, this could be called period 1 or the date. So you don't need to know how to, you don't need to compose URLs by hand because tools are good. So here is another thing to follow. And at this point, so we're right now at the point where you're going to make your own. As a teacher, to make a starter project, you actually do need to have a NetsBlox account. So I will help people who need it. So if I follow that link, I'm getting, I'll show you how it looks for me, and then I will walk you through making an account. So I've seen this recently. So I'm going to hedge my bet and open in Firefox as well. Yeah. So I think this would resolve. I'll try it again. Just reloading. But in case not, this is where you would come. So this little project just makes activity spaces. So if you hit the space bar, you get it to work. I'll run it here. If I run the space bar, where is it? So the first thing you'll get is the request that you log in. And so I will. If you need to make an account, this is very much like the Snap login setup. Under the cloud, if you sign up, often what happened for me is my Snap username was also free in NetsBlox. So what I did was use the same username in both, so I don't have to remember which one I'm in. Okay, so now when I start, I'm not getting a space bar. Oh, okay. It was because I wasn't logged in, I guess. So once I hit the space bar, what it's going to do is look at my published projects. And then, so like if I wanted to make an activity around spirals, then I navigate with the up and down arrows to that project, hit space again, and then name, this activity space is going to be the hash code. So Corey's space, Corey's place. Now, oh, I'm in Firefox. So my allow pop-up. Okay.
Someone has a question about how do you make sure that you have a shareable project?
Yeah, so that's excellent. So let me go back to this now that it loaded. So first, logging in. Once you've signed up, then you need to you want to have, if you remember from this breakdown of the URL, you want to have the ability to you want to have a project that can be opened and that it can be shared, or is shared. And the way that you see which of your projects are shareable or are shared is by, if I say open, then my cloud projects, oh, I switched browsers again. So I log in. And if I open, the ones that show up in bold are shared. So I had to unshare a bunch of things so I didn't get a lot of garbage. But if I wanted to share something, I would hit the share button, and then it shows up in bold. So at that point, if I then start the project, hello shows up. So this list is populated by looking at my account and seeing which projects I have shared. Does that answer the question? Cool. Excellent. So once you have, once you've shared, if I go back to Firefox where I did it, once you've shared a space, now all you have to do to have students come is go to your learner management system or your email or whatever and give them the link. So, and again, the pieces of it are, you'll know, as you look at the URL, you'll notice the starter project looks a whole lot like a, in fact, if I pull off this starter project, copy, get rid of the starter project equals, then I have just the project on its own. But if I put it in, if I have the full URL, then I get this wrapper of the gallery. So it's very transparent in terms of like you can play with the, get the starter project just using your normal NetsBlox tools, and then wrap it as a gallery activity with different hash codes for different groups of students. How are we doing? Actually, if people could post, could paste their URLs into the chat, that would be great. So Philip asked a question about the collaborator option. So I haven't talked a lot about the details of, I've talked at all about the details of what, how NetsBlox differs from Snap. One of its features is the ability to do collaborative projects where inside a project you have different roles. So the gallery is a little bit perpendicular to that idea, where what we're doing is working in parallel and sharing rather than working on a single project together. So the collaborator option, we haven't figured out good ways to do both gallery and collaborator. They're kind of independent tools for different purposes. Actually, let's have, so I see that Akush and Brian are still here. At the end, let's show the collaborator option as a kind of counterpoint, because I think that'll be nice for people who are thinking about collaboration to see. But I don't want to confuse the two functions.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. So so let me come back to slides, and as you get one going, please please publish it to the chat, because it'd be cool to see what people are doing. And then let's just talk about a little bit about how people might use such a function in their classrooms, partly because I'm still working on this. I've used gallery-like ideas across many constructionist learning environments, but everyone is different, and thinking about features that you guys have already mentioned. So you've said one was teacher should be able to unpublish students.
Corey, can I make a comment?
Yeah, please.
So I teach middle school, and when we went into virtual school at the end of last school year, I actually used NetsBlox with a Hummingbird kit, and
Cool.
we did some remote robots. And this would have been awesome to have, because I could then troubleshooting with students virtually is difficult. And so this would have been much easier than having them export their code, me importing it, or trying to zoom it in on their code. And so this is an awesome feature for them to be able to troubleshoot with me, to check their code, see what's going wrong or not wrong. So this is great. Cool.
Yeah, that does sound like a really good use case where it's a share area for debugging. So you might start like a debugging activity could start with the shared project being a buggy program that needs to be fixed, but this kind of like help help area where publish something that you've got challenges with, and you can use either comments or direct intervention to resolve the problem.
Helen says it's also a great way for social interactions, so students can provide feedback for each other.
Cool.
I'm actually a teacher at Berkeley, so it's really interesting because as I'm, hosting this session, but I'm also watching, I think it's really interesting because we're going to have remote CS10 for the next semester. And I was thinking, because I'm going to be a small group tutor, it's going to be really hard to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So I think that, like, for a small group setting, you can like work on projects and make sure that everyone's working on the same page and has the same, like if someone doesn't understand something, it's not just, sharing or copying, you can like collaborate on stuff. So.
Excellent. That is.
So Corey, I have a question. So if I was using this in the classroom, which I'm planning to do, after a while, I can see that there would be a number of different galleries that I've created for various things. So is there some kind of a front end, sort of like the little, what do they call it? The things that they do in front of Scratch, you can click on a little folder and all the projects that have been done in your class, something like that.
Yeah. So I laugh because as this goes from good idea to something that is like a product, it has some real problems. So like I have to have a text file with all of my galleries because I'll lose them if I just depend on the browser history. So yeah, so that would be a good thing. And I think there are two pieces to that idea. One is for the teacher. Then I think where you're headed is maybe it's for others too, right? Like some way to classify activity spaces so they can be navigated. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be good. But yeah, the first feature is just to kind of organize all your galleries so you can find them again in the first place. So that's probably the number one thing.
Yeah.
So Brian says, in the meantime, this could be managed in NetsBlox via cloud variables or in a project.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of the approach for creating the galleries, where if you're making a gallery that's using these NetsBlox galleries within NetsBlox, like if we have access to like the public projects list, for example, as Corey showed in the project that he shared for creating it. You could certainly you could certainly do something similar where that when you create the gallery there, it also records it because you have things like cloud variables and user scope cloud variables, so you could store it in the cloud.
So so cloud variables is one of the services that distinguishes NetsBlox from Snap, and the idea being that you have a persistent store that is associated with you, and so you could use that to be your index to galleries. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah. Sorry, I got a little distracted responding to the next question.
Okay.
Again.
No, I think I just said something that was a repeat of your idea.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So I like the idea of bridging to seeing why NetsBlox has other or how NetsBlox also supports collaboration and communication. Brian, would you, I guess, are there other ideas for using that people had or other improvement ideas that I can get working on right after this call? There should be no barrier to your using this. If you ever run into any questions or trouble, or you forgot how to do it, please do contact me, because again, this is kind of the idea that people other than me would be using this tool is very important to me. So, so if you have any trouble at all, or if you use it once and you're like, wow, that was cool, but it would be much better if X, Y, and Z. Please tell me X, Y, and Z, otherwise it's very unlikely to happen. Cool. So I'm gonna stop. Since people have this access to this presentation, which I'll paste here again, you can also add a slide to tell me if we fill up the ideas for using or improvement ideas. That's a thing I'll pay attention to as well. But Brian, do you want to, or Brian or Akash, do you want to share about the other form of collaboration in NetsBlox?
Well, I was about to invite you to collaborate, but you just stopped sharing your screen. So.
Oh, okay. I'll do that.
So bring up a NetsBlox. I guess just bring up NetsBlox in a tab. Okay. Are you logged in?
I am.
All right. So I'm going to invite you to collaborate.
So what Akash did was, we'll see the button he pressed, but I got a pop message here that says Ledesky has invited me to collaborate with him or her at a project name, and I accept that and say, yes, I'd like to open that shared project, and here it is.
Right, and this works just like Google Docs, so you can edit the same project. So for example, I can just move stuff around, as you can see. And
my hands are off, yeah.
Yeah, and he can edit it at the same time. And also this works offline. So you save this project and you can keep working on it, and there is just one copy. So you are sharing that single copy. So what is being shared is the code itself. So we don't try to share the kind of the state of the program. So the variable values, the stage and stuff like that. So if I execute this program, Corey won't see that. So that's kind of where we are with this.
Or similarly, if I move my sprite, it doesn't move your sprite.
Yeah.
Is that right?
All right. So why don't you click the green flag and see what this program does actually?
All right. Why did I get invited as a collaborator? It looks like.
Right. So this is an interactive Google map. So if you zoom out with the minus key.
Okay. So I'm going to use the minus to zoom out.
Or you can use the arrow keys to pan, and then if you click anywhere, it will show you the current weather conditions.
So I want to go to Knoxville, see what's happening there. It tells me it's 83 degrees Fahrenheit.
So
Yeah,
Rob
so-
has a question that's just saying, so in a classroom, would each collaborative project have a separate tab in the browser, or is there an interface in the single tab that shows all the collaborative projects?
So when you try to open your project, can you bring up the open project dialog? So there are these tabs. You have your own project, and the next tab is the shared with me. So those are the projects that somebody shared with you. So that's basically kind of like the Google thing where you see all your projects and also the ones that were shared with you, and you can open
Like Google Drive, you mean, right?
Yeah, Google Drive.
So this is, so the collaboration functionality in NetsBlox is kind of user-wide or user universe-wide versus the gallery idea is to scope your interactions at the level of a classroom, the level of the people who have the link.
It looks like Helen asked a question as well. So if a group was working on this in collaboration mode, can this be published to a gallery?
Ah. What do you think, Brian?
Oh, sure. So certainly in the gallery, it's a full-fledged NetsBlox editor. So you certainly could, it kind of circling back to Corey's comment on the two different modes of interaction with the gallery. Either you have a template that you start from and people work on it kind of simultaneously, like in a classroom setting, you know, on some like exercise really, and then they post and then they remix during the course of the classroom. Or another, just another way that it could be used, or that it has been used in the past, has been for people to for students to work on their projects on their own, and then just go to the gallery to post as more like a show and tell space, like a scoped, like a show and tell space scoped to that class, that group of
Yeah,
students.
the audience being scoped, yeah.
Exactly, yes.
So I guess this is maybe a way of answering the question. If I remember I went to this test environment, which could have been our space, but I don't want to wreck our space. I could open, after logging in, I could open, now that I'm logged into my account, I could open that same, what happened? Did I fail to log in?
No, I ran into this bug as well. We have been trying to figure it out with Brian.
Well, we found it.
Yeah, that's odd. When I logged in, it seemed to work. But do you mind refreshing and just trying then? Because then you'll still be logged in. But
right, good.
But just, I guess, avoid the bug for this moment, and then I'll hunt it down and try to figure out what the cause is.
So if I now open, now I'm not logged in. So I might be in an infinite loop here. Let me not, the simple, fortunately we have the developer online, so we now have evidence and ability to reproduce. But where I was going with that is that I could have I could have done anything that I can do in the NetsBlox editor, as you saw, make programs and publish them, but I also could have opened. So I could open anything that I had in my list, including Collaborator projects.
Corey, one more thing we haven't showed is actually how to invite somebody to collaborate.
Yeah. So in NetsBlox, you'll notice this this room tab. And so when I go here, I see that there are 2 people involved here, right? With the same role. How do I do that?
Corey, I think you are making this more complicated than needs to be. If you just click on the cloud option, right? No, not that cloud, that cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
next one over, actually, the project drop
The
down.
gear.
No, what happened with the collaborators button?
Oh, sorry. So this is he's in a project right now that he doesn't own, so he can't invite collaborators.
So open a different project or a different tab.
Well, let me let you share. And then you can.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this is the same project. And then here in the cloud variable, I can click on the collaborators, and then it shows all the users that are currently logged in. And Corey is already highlighted because he's already a collaborator in this project, but I can also invite Brian, and then he got the same dialogue that I just invited him to collaborate, and he can open it, and now we'll have 3 people collaborate on the same project. Any other questions?
So Albert asked about the project to create activity spaces, and that's the link I just pasted in. It's also in the presentation. Yeah, don't try to, I wouldn't recommend trying to make it by hacking the URL. It's not that hard to do, but it's much easier just to choose.
I just want to mention that this would be very useful for us at Turtle Stitch too.
Oh, cool.
But I see it as an inspiration for a future approach. Thank you. That's really cool.
Yeah, in the course, the same course that I use this as the starter project for the first day, we go to Turtle Stitch. Now I've got the sewing machine at home, so I'll have to show that, like, prove it to them that we're actually executing. But maybe we can talk about how there's only one little thing that has to happen to the code to make it gallery usable, which is that we have to be able from the outside to ask for the state of the project, and maybe we can get you together with Brian to see how that works, so the Turtle Stitch could be galleried.
Super. So we keep it in mind and see it as a future project probably.
Cool.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
All right, we are out of time. I really appreciate people playing along and participating. And it's super inspirational to see people responding positively that, that they might find this useful. Again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions or forgot in the fire hose that is SnapCon. If you forgot what we did here or lost a link, please reach out to me. Thanks.